First of all, you're cherry picking East Asian countries and comparing them to the entire continent of Africa, which is on par for how a lot of us have been brainwashed to think of Africa as a monolith. Second of all, the explanation is simple. It is Western colonization and greed. Now, East Asian countries have also faced disruption due to European and United States colonization attempts and interference, but not to the same degree and duration as many African nations. Western wealth relies on controlling Africa and having the rest of us believe that Africa is poor. Nothing to see here, we're just trying to help poor people. But if Africa was really poor, why the constant colonization and interference? It's because Africa is not poor. Africa is rich with natural resources. Then people say it's not about the amount of natural resources that are in the ground. They can't realize that wealth if they don't have the technology to extract it. So if after all of this colonization, interference, and Western help and technology to extract the natural resources so that Africa can realize its wealth, Africa is still poor, it has to be because Western greed is stealing Africa's wealth. There are other ways that European colonization continues to have lasting effects that still contribute to conflict and poverty in Africa. If you look at a map of Africa, the political borders are drawn on a much more latitudinal and longitudinal grid than the political borders of other continents. And this is because Europe partitioned Africa without respect to natural features and without respect to the preferred borders of people based on ethnicity. And that continues to result in conflict between ethnicities within countries, and that 16 countries are landlocked also contributes to poverty. With respect to being advanced, a lot of us have been indoctrinated into the idea that the Western way of life is the platinum standard of living, and there are a lot of people on the planet who don't agree with that. Now, I know you're talking about East Asian countries, but it makes sense that in order to become and remain globally competitive, there are non-Western countries that follow in the Western trajectory of progress, advancement, and technology in order to be globally competitive. With respect to Africa in particular, they're now having to watch as this way of life wreaks havoc on the shared planet. So they are having to share in harms caused by a way of life that they contributed very little to, and those harms are going to increase poverty. And lastly, this attempt at divide and conquer is so transparent. What did you think you were going to accomplish with this question? Did you think that I was going to read it and say, oh, that's a really good point. I guess I spend so much time focusing on issues in the United States that I never looked at the big picture. I certainly don't feel like I'm better than anybody else, but now that you point this out, maybe Asians are inherently superior. Did you really think that I wasn't going to be able to recognize that